Coming up today on Folks, we continue our programming on the new Black agenda. What should be the top priority for Black America as we approach the 21st century? You decide on today's edition of Folks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Folks. I'm Sonya Masingale. A report published earlier this year entitled A Common Destiny, Blacks in American Society, 1989, states the status of Black Americans today can be characterized as a glass that is half full, if measured by progress since 1939, or a glass that is half empty if measured by the persisting disparities between Black and white Americans since the early 1970s. It seems in America today we have unfinished business and much work to do for all Americans to achieve true equality on all fronts. We've been taking a look this month at something I call the new Black agenda. It's very clear that in order to continue the upward mobility of all Black Americans and help reduce the number of impoverished Black Americans, there must be a movement and involvement from within the Black community. The responsibility belongs to each and every one of us. Joining me here today in Studio A here in LPB is Joseph Guillory, an attorney from the city of Baton Rouge. And also joining me are many distinguished leaders from communities around the state of Louisiana who have come together today to share their ideas and create a unity of purpose in forming the new Black agenda into the 1990s and beyond. Thank you for being here, and give yourself a round of applause. I'd like to begin the questioning with Mr. Guillory. Since he is our distinguished platform guest, he's sitting up there all alone. I don't want him to feel lonely. Mr. Guillory, what evidence have you seen in your practice as a lawyer that indicates that there is a new Black agenda afoot? There's something brewing in the Black community today.
I think the new Black agenda, as I see it, has less to do with civil rights politicians and the church per se. I think historically we can look at this year, Ralph Swinton, a Black economist at Jackson State University who wrote the Urban League's report on Black America 1989, has said that we still continue to have 1/3 of our Black population that lives below the poverty level. We have 45% of our Black children who live below the poverty level. And this is something that we have wrestled with for many years. In 1933, at the Armenia conference, which was the NAACP conference, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois urged the leadership to alter its middle-class longing or parading for civil rights and to launch into an economic campaign for the downtrodden masses. I think the predicament we find ourselves in is that since 1960 we have found that we are still pursuing these middle-class tendencies, and we have forgotten the Black masses. When we see that 1/5 of the Black population has an income of perhaps $51,000, but then the other 4/5, especially the last 1/5, has an annual income of less than $4,000, that we still have many, many problems. What I see taking place not only in America, but amongst Black people worldwide, is an awakening of who and what they are, something which has been hidden from us as well as stolen from us, and that is our beautiful history. We were told, or our ancestors were told, that we were taken from Africa, that we were nothing, that we had bones in our noses. And the truth of the matter is that ancient Africa, and I would prefer to use the term Kemet, which is an African term to describe Egypt, because Egypt is a Greek term. Kemet means land of the blacks. In our golden ages of the pyramids, we did not have the type of Egyptians you see today that are mulatto or who look like me. The people who built the pyramids were black, blue black. And we had multi-geniuses back then. Imhotep, a gentleman who was revered in Greece. And this is written, the Greeks were not really thieves because they wrote of these things. Imhotep was worshipped as the god of medicine. He also was a multi-genius who built the first pyramid for Pharaoh Doja. So I think when we look at our history, and if we can instill this in our children, it's rather hard to do, Sonya, with adults because we don't want to study. But when we can infuse this into the classroom and teach our children, then we have self-esteem coming about. And when you have self-esteem in an individual, he doesn't worry about welfare. A person will go stake out a street corner and not sell drugs, but sell vegetables. So what I find is the masses of black people are moving away from political ideals or middle-class civil rights ideals and are moving towards an understanding of who and what they are and then moving forward from there. And I think it's exciting. And I think that perhaps if we do have a chance, it's going to be with our youth, knowing who they are, and not being racist, but understanding that they are black, beautiful, and have a history.
So in other words, what you're saying is there's much more than an economic development move in black America, that it has to do with a re-education, if you will, of black people in order to lift their self-esteem. Now, I'm curious about, of our studio guests, how many people here are involved in perhaps studying this type of history? I mean, is this something that's going on among our people, or is this something that's pretty isolated? Mr. Guillory is the only person who is there. Is there? Okay, there's plenty of people. Okay, so this is nothing new. You're not hearing anything new. Mr. Khaliq, would you care to comment?
I agree with Mr. Guillory that this is one of the prime ways of maintaining the African-American community in such a substandard state. That is by depriving us of our past history and contributions and great civilizations. Oh, I thought you were taking a microphone. Okay, but on the concern for the new black agenda, I've always contended that there is no new black agenda. The agenda for the black community has always been the same agenda that all human beings in every society desires: suitable homes, decent living environment, the necessities, basic food, shelter, and clothing. But due to the condition that we are in America, we find ourselves in an isolated condition in what we call the ghettos or the colonized areas of America. And as Mr. Guillory said, that we're getting away from the trend that politicians can solve our problems, because we have innumerable elected black officials across the nation. In the past week, we just had 5 elected. And what we need to get into is to more of the economic issues and those issues that will bring about self-esteem in the African-American community.
All right. Joining us here today, we also have Mr. Takuna Dixon, who is the founder of Ujima, the Ujima Conference in Lafayette, Louisiana, which we visited earlier this month. And you mentioned that Ujima was one of the 7 black principles, and I'd like for you to restate that again for this audience, if you would.
Yes. Ujima is one of the 7 black principles of the Nguzo Saba, which means cooperative economics and familyhood. Ujima has been initiated this year as a statewide activity. It is geared toward a self-help concept, which is consistent with what Mr. Guillory has said. There has to be a comprehensive approach in terms of addressing our problem as a people. We can no longer afford to allow ourselves as a people to rely on a middle class that perpetuates a concept and ideas that is a watered-down version of what we need to address as a people. We have to, as a people, begin to regenerate. My term is regenerate some brain cells in a new direction and develop a new way of thinking. Ujima attempts to create a foundation to attract those kinds of thinkers throughout the state of Louisiana. It is not only an economic program, but it's a program of familyhood. It's a program of people. It is geared toward putting the control of our destiny in the masses of people. Sonya, we do not have a significant number of real black leadership that represents us. What we have is an illusion of leadership. And because of that illusion of leadership, we have been politricked rather than receiving the kind of political representations that we should be receiving in certain areas. Therefore, it does not matter what agenda we choose to address, whether we call it a black agenda, a blue agenda, a polka dot agenda, but if we allow the individuals, whether they be black, blue, green, or yellow, to represent us and to carry out the necessary duties and responsibilities of our agenda, then, and those individuals have not done so in the past years, and we continue to allow that kind of representation, then it does not matter what agenda we choose, we will find ourselves in a predicament where we will be spinning our wheels in the mud.
Now, earlier this week, we'll add that there were several black elected to new and more prestigious posts than ever before. However, they won those offices not by campaigning on civil rights. They won a significant part of the white vote, but by addressing more economic development issues. Are we trying to say that the civil rights era is dead? Would somebody care to comment on that? Is the civil rights era dead in America? Are we not concerned with keeping those policies?
I don't think that civil rights is dead per se. I think that that's evident by the number of racial incidents that have been taking place across the country. And I think that's very important for us to address on the black agenda today, tomorrow, and in the future. As I see it, young people especially, the emotions are brewing, and sooner or later they're going to erupt. And therefore, civil rights must address some of those issues, and I don't think that civil rights is dead or that we should put it on the back burner necessarily. It's just a new civil rights because it's a new type of oppression. You understand? It's not you can't sit at the back of the bus kind of thing. It's more of a mental, economic, always been economic oppression. It's not as blatant in some areas, but by no means do I personally think the civil rights is dead or ever will be in America.
Okay, Mr. Guillory, I'd like to address this one to you. In someone's beeper is going on. In talking about re-education of the children, are you talking about actually developing textbooks and things of this nature, or just using things that are already in existence? And are we only talking about educating black children or educating the whole American population?
I think as black people, we have a responsibility to family first. I think we have to re-educate our black youth first, because it's our black youth that's being portrayed on television as the danger in the neighborhood. It's our black youth that's being portrayed as so vicious that not even the police can control anymore. That we have the government at every level. National, Mr. Bush has said it. State, Mr. Roma has commented on it. That perhaps we're going to need the National Guard to come in and deal with our youth. I think we risk losing our youth, not just mentally, but physically. I think we owe it also to America, if America wants to wake up. But America is responsible for miseducating their own. As a young student at McNeese State University in the late 60s, we tried very hard to get black studies into McNeese. On a recent visit to McNeese, I went in to look at the textbooks, and I find that no longer is there black studies or a black history course. That hurt. But then I picked up a Western civilization book that's being used in a history course at McNeese. And I found that the slaves being sold at the slave market were portrayed in costumes exactly like the whites. The only thing was that the blacks were squatting down below the whites, but the same costume, the same clothing were on the blacks. There was even one black with a derby on. Now, this is totally out of context with era, because we know that derbies didn't come about until the 20th century. So we do know that there are some writers, and this is not in a racist context, but we do know that there are some writers who write textbooks and portray other races as the conquerors of the world, as the thinkers of the world. Something that was brought home to me quite clearly was recently a black gentleman, he's dead now, but Bobby Wright, showed that in questioning not only black youth, but children, say in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade, when Sean was asked, where was he from? Sean said, I'm Irish, I'm from Ireland. When Gino was asked, where are you from, Gino? Gino said, I'm Italian, I'm from Italy. And we're talking about American children in American schools. And when Jean-Luc was asked, Jean-Luc, where are you from? Jean-Luc said, I'm French. My ancestors came from France. And when the black youth was asked, where are you from, Joe? I'm from Baton Rouge. This is important, that the minds of our children, where are they? So we do have to make a conscious effort if we have to rewrite the textbooks ourselves. But America owes it to itself to bring all of its people together, to educate the white youth, to educate their parents, that their system and their wealth, their accumulation of wealth, did not take place until the African slave trade. You know, this is a reality. You can find in a book written by Mr. Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. We are all taught that Africans were brought into America in the 1600s. This is a lie. We are scholarly enough to go into the library and to search these things out. There was a gentleman by the name of Sir John Hawkins, who in the 15th century, or the 1500s, 16th century, went into Africa and kidnapped a boatload of Africans and brought them into the Caribbean. Upon his arrival in London, England, the amount of wealth and profit from that one boatload not only caught the attention of English businessmen, but caught the attention of Queen Elizabeth I. We can find these things. And Queen Elizabeth I put up monies to construct him a new ship to go back after more slaves. And what I found most interesting when I discovered Mr. Sir John Hawkins and Queen Elizabeth's working with him was that they named that ship Jesus. So we had Europeans going into Africa, kidnapping and tricking our people by using the holy name of Jesus. We have to understand this, not from a hateful position, not from a racist position, because our children's lives are at stake. And if America wants to pull America together again, to pull itself out of this economic chaos and bring love where black and white and brown and red and yellow will work together, then we have to rewrite and truly present true history, not someone's made-up history.
All right, then. Once the history has been rewritten, once we understand, will the banks magically begin to acknowledge us as full human beings? One of the problems in the black economy is that black children are raised to grow up and get a job, whereas other children are raised to grow up and start businesses and employ people and provide a service, a good, something manufactured, provide employment. But our children traditionally have not been taught. So once we rewrite the history, then what? Where do we go economically? What is the next key to economic development? Mr. Perkins.
Well,
that's an excellent point, and it is a part of our history in America that we have never focused on, and that is the fact that we need to be businessmen. We need to be businesswomen. If you look around America at other ethnic groups that have been the victims of racism, have been the victims of the American system, the Oriental population, the Hispanic population, they have begun. Now, they are still suffering the problems associated with that racism, but they have begun to focus upon the fact that if I get an education, if I live good family values, and, you know, whether you call it middle class or not, I don't really care, but I think all of us, both black, white, yellow, or brown, are talking about the same types of things that are going to keep our people and this country moving forward, and that is family, education, and business. We need to begin to focus on the fact that in order to fully participate in this system, and that's the decision that we're going to have to make as black people, do we want to be full participants in this process? If we want to do it, we're going to have to begin to focus some attention upon the entrepreneurial spirit that is what this country is all about. And until we do begin to focus some attention and some direction there, we will never be a full partner in the American system.
I agree 100% with Mr. Perkins, but one thing that we have to include in this mix, Tommy, is that the Vietnamese, the Chinese, I dare say the German, the Italian, never endured 320 to 340 involuntary slavery, where not a penny, not one copper was paid for wages. When you teach a child that he is something versus he's just a jigaboo, or he's just a ham bone, or he came out of Africa with a bone in his nose. You see, the Vietnamese child has his culture. The Italian came here with his culture. The Irishman came here with his culture. The German, all of these. Once they have self-esteem. They know of themselves. Therefore, they can dream. They can look for advancement for themselves. But we were raped of all of this knowledge. And I really believe that Tom is on the right track. But we have to have this infusion into our youth's mind of self-esteem. And then we can move forward.
How about those of us that we can applaud for that. This is a great group for this discussion because many of us here are entrepreneurs. I mean, we have several self-made business people, and people also, something that's very common among black people is you don't always find them doing one thing. There's several people here who have a job and one or two or three different businesses. So I agree that with Mr. Perkins that entrepreneurship is going to be one of the major keys to our success in the 1990s, along with the building of the self-esteem. But I think maybe it's going to have to take place side by side. Now, you know, the Gallup poll polled blacks to find out what the problem was, or what they viewed as the problem with black businesses, why black businesses have such a hard time getting started, why they often fail, because the Hispanics have a much smaller population in the United States, and not as many businesses start up numerically as black businesses, but their businesses surpass ours in terms of survival and per capita dollar coming in. And what the people said was access to capital or access to money is the biggest inhibitor to black business. And I know there are many of us who would agree with that here. Now, how is raising our self-esteem going to increase our access to that capital? First, Mr. Wayne.
I don't know. I think self-esteem is important, and I think the points that Mr. Guillory made are very important. But I think the new black agenda, primarily we need to be concerned about the economic plaques that we find ourselves in as black people. I make the statement very facetiously that if I needed to borrow $50,000, there's no black person I know in Baton Rouge I can go get it from. And that's a shame, but that's the facts of life. I would have to go to a white institution I look at right across the street from the barber shop that I go in the black community here, and there's a bunch of Vietnamese kids that live in that hotel there, and they came here, and they've been living together, and they've been bringing one another and brothers and sisters over, and they buying this hotel, and they're going to school there. The point I make is that we left the sense of community. I think the self-esteem part, if it's going to be interwoven into the overall topics here, is that we must have assets, and nobody's going to give it to us. We must take and seize. We must help each other in the black community. We must spend our dollars in the black community. We must develop a system, an economic system, whereby we can control. And one of the things I always said in a very revolutionary way is that the thing we don't have is we don't have a black tax. And everybody say, oh, my God, you know, Jim Wayne's talking about a black tax. I say that in a very funny way, is that suppose we did have a black tax. Suppose we had a tax that black people tax themselves from our wages and what have you. And then we raised millions and millions of dollars, and we had control of the destiny, how those dollars would be spent. The point I make is we control no mechanism whereby black dollars can be funded and used for the black community. Up in Ferriday, Louisiana, is there a swimming pool that black kids can go and use? Or in Bunkie, Louisiana, do we have any control over the public dollars that's going to be spent there? There are going to be a lot of tax dollars, but we have no vehicle where we can control those funds anywhere so they can be in the black community.
Okay. Dr. Mencer?
Yes, I agree with everything Mr. Guillory has said also, and I feel that he's right on in what he's saying. In response to Jim's remarks, if you had a place that you could go and get $50,000 tomorrow, you still might have a business that doesn't make it. And the fact of the matter is that we have access to a lot of things that we never had access to in the past. And we find ourselves just in dire straits, as much dire straits as we've ever been in, probably even more. And I say that to say this, that, you know, I see our plight very much as a disease, an illness. I choose to call that disease psychological slavery or brainwashing. And like any other disease, until you understand the true etiology of the disease will continue to go rampant. You may be able to control the symptoms. Take AIDS, for instance. We don't know the true etiology and nature of AIDS, so we're not able to develop a vaccine to control the disease. We can treat the symptoms. We can give medicine for infection. We can treat the nutritional and anemic problems. But until we develop a vaccine, AIDS is going to run rampant. Similar with us. What we're looking at in terms of our problems are just symptoms. The problems with health care, problems with unemployment, underemployment, inability to advance once employed, first fired, last hired, drug problems, alcohol problems, teenage pregnancy. All of these things are simply symptoms of a disease. The disease being that of psychological slavery, brainwashing. That disease can only be wiped out with the initiation of what Mr. Guillory is talking about, and that is education of who we are.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for being here. I can't believe we're out of time, but we are for today.
4:30, huh? We were having fun.
Please join us again for another edition of Folks. Bye-bye.